Hi, it's Ian from Huge Menace, and today I thought I would show you this keyboard that I've been modeling. It is the Nomad E Keyboard from Work Louder, and I modeled it using our free plugin for Blender called ND, which is a non-destructive modeling toolkit. Okay, so let's have a look at how I modeled parts of this keyboard, and we'll look at a couple of different techniques. To begin with, I might just hide some of the details and we'll look at the main shape and form. Now you can see this has a number of Boolean cutouts. If I go into the modifier stack and just turn most of this off, you can see that I started with a really simple shape. It's just a rectangle. And then you can see from there that I applied a vertex bevel, so the corner is rounded. After that, I've applied a solidify modifier to give it a bit of thickness. From there, you can see I start to cut out various parts of the shape. In this case, the bed for the actual keys themselves. I might turn on the wireframe so you can see this a bit better. And this is actually a pretty important part of non-destructive modeling. It's to think about starting with really simple primitive shapes and then carving out like a sculptor. So whether you're subtracting or adding something using Booleans, it helps to think about the way you might approach it as a sculptor using simple primitives. The next interesting thing to talk about with this particular shape is this little keyboard notch at the front. Now this runs the length of the spacebar, and you can see it's got a little beveled sort of rounded edge. And it's helpful to think about using cutters and rounding those cutters where you need to. So let's have a look at this in front view. And I'm just going to select here and go and use the cycle operator. And you can see here that this is the cutter that I use to cut out the little notch here at the front. And if we inspect this, you can see that it's really just a very simple shape. And then these two vertices, the same on the other end, have just had a vertex bevel to round them out. Rounding your cutters like this to carve away at your overall shape is a really useful technique. Just one thing to be aware of here, where I've made this curve downwards and kind of coplanar with the top of the overall shape, I've just had to make sure this vertice is either exactly coplanar or above. Now, sometimes you may need to actually tweak this so that it is higher, because if you have it too low, you'll notice it starts to cut into the overall shape and you end up with maybe some geometry that you don't want. Let's take a look at another technique used on this model. For the keys, that you can see that they have this little concave area. This whole shape actually just starts off as a rectangle that's then at a vertex bevel to round the corners, and then an edge bevel to round these edges. But the way that this little concave area works is kind of interesting. If we have a look at the wireframe, you can see it's pretty clear that a sphere has been used to cut this out, and it's quite shallow. The interesting thing about this is the way that that sphere is actually formed. So if I use the cycle operator to reveal that, it's a quad-based sphere, so it's not one of the default primitives. And if I take a look at how that was actually created, you can see it actually starts with a cube. And then to that cube, we've applied a bevel, and you use clamp overlap to the cube. You can actually turn it into a sphere. And the advantage of this is that we can basically manage the mesh tessellation and get just the right number of polygons that we need. An important aspect to note with this is that it is a squashed sphere. And if we look in the scale, you can see the Z scale of this is 0.15. Now, if I were to apply that scale, it'll basically break the bevel that's making it into a sphere. So in this case, we don't want to apply the scale, and then that works perfectly to actually create this nice concave shape. Let's take a look at another button. You can see these little function buttons on the left of the keyboard. And if I zoom in and take a look at the modifiers, I'll just turn off the array. And if we look in at the wireframes, you can see that this has a nice beveled edge. It also has this concave, subtle concave inset as well. Now, how this was achieved is with the screw operator. So we'll just turn the wireframes off for a moment and turn on X-ray mode. If we take a look at the profile that was swept around using the screw operator, it's got several vertices, and these two vertices here have a vertex bevel that creates a nice soft curve, and then the little edge bevel that you see. Simple technique, but very effective. For the animation you saw in the intro to this video, I had a bit of fun with an area light and using it as a projector. Now my setup here is pretty simple. I've got a ground plane. I've got a rim light here, which is an area light. And then I've got this main key light, which is an area light. Now it's very thin right now, but I'll explain why that is in a moment. Then of course you've got the camera and the keyboard. Now if I scrub through the timeline here, you can see that that key light area light is in fact scaling up as I animate through. And that's what basically achieved that nice effect we have. If we take a look at it in rendered view, you can kind of see you get this sort of lines and then it kind of spreads out and starts to reveal the keyboard. So I'm using this area light and I'm using it like a projector. And what I mean by that is that if we go into shading and take a look, you can see that I've used nodes for this area light. There's a texture coordinate and mapping node, and then it splits off into three noises. Now these are 4D noise, so they have the W parameter. You can see I've been animating that, and that just means the noise will move position. And you can see there's a large, medium, and small detail noise. They go through color ramps, which allow me to control how much coverage each noise applies. They're then mixed and put into the emission output. And that's how you get that nice lighting effect in the animation. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, and consider joining our community over on our Discord. You can jump in there, chat with each other, and ask us questions about non-destructive modeling with the ND Addon. Thanks, I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time.